Hey, high rollers, very excited to talk to our guest today. If you're like me and we're watching Poker Night in America the past few days live on Twitch, then you saw this guy absolutely dominate the field. He was the man playing 2550. He pocketed close to 60 grand. That's after some run good and after some good play. No stranger to both. This guy's won close to 2 million playing live tournaments, but his forte is the high stakes cash game, a regular in Macau and writer of his very popular Hand of the Day on his blog site, alectorelli.com, and for Card Player Magazine. Our guest, of course, Alec Torelli. Alec, thanks for joining us, man. Thanks for being a high roller.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here. We were trying to do this for quite some time, so this is obviously great timing, and we have some exciting stuff to talk about.
Absolutely. You're a busy man. You're flying all over the country. You're playing cash games here and there. Let's talk about Poker Night in America, Florida. You absolutely crushed it. Be honest. Was that an easy game for you?
I think that relative to the games, the high stakes games in Macau, I think that it's the level of competition is a little easier in that game. Yes, I think the game that exists in Macau, and this is sort of a function of just market efficiency. I mean, anytime there's a ton of money to be made, there's going to be more competition, right? So the competition rises proportionally with the opportunity. And so when the opportunity is 5, 10, 20 times greater, then you have to expect that the competition is going to be there too. And so I think that's sort of a relative measurement of what you could expect to find in some of the big games in Macau. And so I think that prepared me immensely for a game like the last two poker nights in America that I played in Turning Stone and this one here in Florida. And I think that if you watch the live stream, it showed.
Absolutely. I mean, I watched the Turning Stone one too. Didn't even mention that, but yes, back-to-back Poker Night in America, you've absolutely crushed it. You mentioned Macau. Can we talk about your activity there? What's the scene like over there? I'm a huge poker junkie, and I'm very intrigued by this place called Macau because we hear about the high stakes. What kinds of games are you playing? What stakes are you playing? And you mentioned some of the opponents because there's big money, they're tougher. But are you also facing a lot of businessmen? Is that what's drawing the likes of you, Ivy, and Dewan over there?
Yeah, so the landscape of Macau changed dramatically in the past, 3.5 years since I first went there, and it's pretty much been a complete shift. Where early 2012, when I first got there, it was, I was the minority, and minority in every sense. There weren't many white people, guilos as we call them, funny name for them, and there weren't many high stakes cash game pros, and there was just mainly locals and the local tourists that would play the game, and that would be that would basically comprise the average look of the game there. And so obviously it was really, really lucrative, and it was a completely different landscape there. And now it's completely the opposite. We had in late 2013 we had a really huge influx of pros from all over the world. They came from the UK, Scandinavia, Germany, Russia, and all the best players started coming from all over the world. And only the best ones of those best players ended up staying there because the games got more and more tougher. Some of the older pros that were making their way in Macau in 2010, 2012 stopped playing, and they weren't really playing much anymore over the past 2 years just because the games got tougher. And instead of being, 6-7 fish and one or two pros just trying to make the money in the game, it became 7 or 8 pros, and with increasing difficulty, and then, less and less VIPs in the game. Several things contributed to that. One was they banned smoking in Macau. Two was they changed the regulation for visas, where they allowed only 3 days for Chinese visas in Macau now. That was down from 7, which was down from higher earlier on. So it's just harder to get there, and they've obviously cracked down a lot on the flow of money in and out of Macau. And so a lot of things contributed to there being less tourists, which makes the game tougher, and there just being more pros. So in a way, it's been good because I feel like walking into the win and trying to play in the big game that goes at the win now is one of the toughest cash games in the world that I've ever played. And so while
And this is at the Win in Macau.
yeah, just like the everyday game that goes.
Wow.
While that is like, there's still opportunity there because sometimes the game does get big when the right person walks in. It's it's much less sustainable for most people. Now I wouldn't recommend just like going out there to play in that game only. Um, and there's still some games at the smaller games that are good. The game's also a little smaller than it was historically because there's not as much flow of traffic, right? So that affects it as well. But just the people that have stayed there throughout the years has made the game so much more competitive that you're forced to play on a level that you wouldn't otherwise challenge yourself to. You can't get away with doing, sort of rudimentary plays that might work in a 2-5 no limit cash game where you could just 3-bet people with punity and just hope that they don't adjust to you. Like, people are very, very, very smart. So you can't even get away with value betting the river thinly in certain spots because people are just going to make it too hard to play against you. And so it's really tough, and it challenges you to be at your best, and I think that's been the best preparation of my career.
Well, listen, I'm wondering, the first few times you go over there, we hear about the high stakes and the game's so big, and you mentioned a lot of the pros are attracted to it now. We just read that Daniel Jungleman Cates lost about $5 million in a couple sessions over there. Is that game over there dangerous for a guy like you, or are you so comfortable in your playing style now that you feel right at home there?
That's a good question. First, I wouldn't believe any of the gossip you hear.
Okay.
The only people that know what's going on are the people that are there. And the only people that are ever going to tell anybody, like, what's actually going on are never going to say anything about, specific private details, like something like that. I think it's just too much information to reveal that is just, not fair to anybody that's actually going through it. But that being said, like, about the game specifically, I think that there was a growth period in that comfort. So, like, when I first got there, I was really comfortable because I was in a situation that was really familiar to me, and I felt really confident, like I was one of the best players in the game just because of the lack of competition that was surrounding me at the time. And then there was a midway point where the competition changed, and it wasn't like I had never played with that competition before, but it was just like I had got used to thriving in an environment that was easier for the past year before that competition got tough. And then when it got really tough, it was a transition point, and it was hard to get used to. And there's a lot of adjustments you have to make, and that's really the point where you kind of sink or swim. And I think getting through that bridge and like working harder than I've ever worked in my career to stay on top of my game has really made me much more comfortable in the games over there, and then also especially in games that I come back to that are a little less competitive, like some of the games that you saw the last couple days, where I think I was very comfortable at the table for two reasons: because the game itself, and also because the size of the game is so in my comfort zone. Even a play like making a big bluff for all my stack, or making a huge value bet for my whole stack, or like those things they don't touch me, and I don't have to overcome them while I'm playing. Whereas in the game in Macau, I would still try and separate myself from the money and make myself focus only on decision making, but there's energy being expelled trying to do that because there's some mental control things you have to do in order to separate yourself from so much amount of money that you're playing with. It's much, much harder. And then when you come back to a game that's smaller, it's easier to do that. It's because you have practice. So if you were to play a game that's half the size, or the viewers, let's say your normal game is 5-10 no limit, 2-5 no limit, and then you go play 50 cent a dollar, it's not going to be hard for you to like make a big bluff because you're not going to be intimidated by the fact that it's costing you a little bit less than it would in a normal game. You're much more comfortable. So I think the preparation over there has helped. And there was a period where it was really tough, and you kind of improve your skill level to thrive in that competition. And so I've been fortunate to make friends with who I think are the best players in the world out there, and that's being around those people, you're gonna improve. You have to. It's like you don't have a choice.
Absolutely. You talk about comfort zones. I play a $25 tournament every day online. It's Omaha High Low. I feel comfortable in that game. I play 1-2 at the casino. I feel comfortable there. 5-10 would terrify me. I recently read a quote, Doug Polk, one of the best poker players in the world, about Macau. He says, "I don't play one house, two house." I mean, it really takes, guts to be in the game, and you got to be good as well. And when you get to that point where you feel comfortable, that's saying something about the quality of your play, because it really is not for everybody. Let's talk about, again, the Poker Night in America. What are most people doing wrong in cash games? I mean, what is Phil Hellmuth doing wrong? Because There's a guy, it seems to me, who beats the No Limit Hold'em tournaments very easy, 14 bracelets. Then he switches to Raz, and he may now be considered one of the best Raz players in the world. But why can he not make the transition to cash games? He always seems to struggle.
Oh, I don't want to pick on Phil in particular. I think let's.
Okay, let's not pick on Phil, but it's trouble for a lot of tournament players.
Yeah,
They play tournaments,
exactly.
they feel comfortable, then they play cash and they just donk it off.
Well, okay, there's two things. One is like what players struggle with generally in cash games, and then a second thing is what tournaments players don't adapt to correctly in cash games. So let's focus on the tournament one because that was kind of the question that's
Okay.
probably most practical and most interesting to a lot of the viewers, especially because a lot of people play tournaments or prefer tournaments because of the competition or the glory, whatever it is, and then they go to cash games, and it's a totally different animal. Well, mainly in tournaments, if you think about how strategically it works, tournaments are a game where you play 80% or 90% of your tournament with less chips than you do in cash games. So your average stack in a tournament, especially unless you play like big premier events where the average stack is like 50 big blinds throughout the tournament, most of the time the average stack in a tournament is like 20 big blinds or 30 big blinds. And so, you're not really forced to make any big decisions if you think about it. The decision might be big in the sense that it's for your whole tournament life, but your stack to pot ratio is really small. So it's an easy decision because of the fact that you're not ever making a big river check raise decision because you never get that far in the hand because usually you're all in pre-flop or you're all in on the flop. It's never like you play a 3-street game and you never get to the point where you're threatened by a 3-bet pre-flop because it might cost you your whole stack on the flop, turn, and river. It's just going to cost you your whole stack in that moment. So it's not like the same game at all. And if you think about from a strategic standpoint, what you're supposed to do in a tournament is you're supposed to preserve your chips over pursue your equity. And that's simple math because in a tournament, having a chip in a chair is more important than having more chips because your chair is actually worth something,
Right.
Especially if you're in the money. So from a strategic standpoint, it's much better to preserve the chips you have, which causes people to play passive. If you notice some of the playing style of tournament players in cash games, they'll limp in, they will be a little passive, and they'll just kind of like try and flop hands, and they don't really apply pressure in spots where it would be prudent to do so. In cash games, your goal is you're playing with deeper stacks. When you play with deeper stacks, you have more decision-making ability. When you have more decisions, there's more skill involved.
And you got to push the edges more.
Yeah, that just makes more sense. Because there's more decisions, there's more skill involved. Because you're playing deeper stack poker, you're going to make bigger decisions on every single street. There's more room for better players to maneuver around the table, right? It's not like in a tournament where you're all in on the flop. You have to just like have a hand. You can't really, float people or outplay them as much. So there's that aspect. And in cash games, like you said, your goal is to maximize expectations. So you have to push tiny edges and not worry about the fact that you might bust your stack because it's still a plus EV play. You can rebuy that stack. So it's a totally different game, and it's played differently.
You received some high praise, not only for your play at Poker Night in America, but also for your commentating. You jumped in the booth quite frequently, and I know a lot of the viewers, and I know David Tuckman, they all enjoyed you in the booth. Sort of goes in with my next question about the blog. I mean, you write the hand of the day. Do you find that talking about hands, writing about hands, journaling your thoughts has improved your game? And do you find that most players neglect that area?
Yeah, so I think that's helped me a ton to do my Hand of the Day channel, which I put on YouTube for free. Anyone could just go on my YouTube and see hands that I play. Even on Poker Night in America, I'm going to put out 5 or 6 hands from this session, 5 or 6 from the last one, of big hands that I play that are 20, 30, 50,000, and my thought process during every single street in real time. And you could see me playing and see the opponents playing and then see what I'm thinking. And sometimes I even get the opponents in the booth and see what they're thinking too. So that's helped me a lot because it sort of forces me to walk through my thought process out loud. But that's something I've been doing for a long time to help improve my game off the table. So that's always been a part of my study regimen. But I think what's helped me more than doing those sorts of things was doing coaching. And I have a private coaching practice, which I do a lot of. I have 2 clients today. I had 2 yesterday that I met with here in West Palm and on the internet. And so that's really helped me a lot because you're approaching other people's situations and you're giving them like blueprint strategies to think about the game in a different perspective so they can make all of their decisions better, and you're forced to break down the game in a way that is simple enough for someone else to understand, but complex enough to where they can take that information and beat players that are better than wherever they are. And so that's really helped me a ton. And doing that has helped make me think about the game in a different way, and it's made me a lot better of a player.
I also know that you have the interactive workbook, 4 Steps to Beating Anyone at Poker. I love the title. Is that a proven formula? It must be.
I think it's really good. I think that, I mean, some of the people that come to me wanting private coaching, they're like, hey, I would like to work with you. I'm like, look, for the cost of 1 hour of working with me, you could buy the book. And I think that a lot of the people would benefit more from that. And that's basically why I wrote it, because I was getting a lot of requests, and I only like to work with like 4 people at a time, because it's like so intense with the program we go through one-on-one. And I give a lot of my time and energy to my clients that I work with. And so I really think this is like a great, I wrote this with the people in mind that wanted to come to me and be like, look, I'm at this point and I want to jump up and beat the next game. And, you know, all the strategy questions that they would have, I put in 100+ page workbook. And it really is like a workbook in the sense that there's exercises after each chapter, and there's like time in aspects where you could help think about your game and be introspective and think about, you know, what you could do differently to improve whatever the study material is that we're working on. So it really is a workbook. And I think that it, you know, going through it and doing all the exercises would help someone that wants to get better at poker immensely. And that is another product that's helped me a ton, because again, it forced me to put everything I learned from private coaching and playing into one easy to follow, like step-by-step manual. And that's really what I aimed it to be. So I'm excited for that. I've gotten a ton of orders recently from being on Poker Night and whatever. And so that's been really cool. And I'm excited. It's a new step for me in the poker world, and it's fun. It's been a lot of fun.
Well, listen, you got to check out the website. It's alectorelli.com. You can pick up that workbook. A lot of great hands of the day. Also his YouTube channel, Alec Torelli. A couple of more questions real quick here, Alec.
Sure, man.
No bracelets yet, but I know you've been so close. In fact, your biggest live score, 2008 in the 10K Heads Up World Championship at the WSOP, you came second to J.C. Tran. Jonathan Jaffe, Vanessa Selps tied for third. That was Kenny Tran, right. Another great player. That was a stacked field. Must have been a little disappointing at the time, but at the same time, very rewarding. I mean, you navigated it, a big score, and that's one of the highlight tournaments of the WSOP every year, the Heads Up.
Yeah, I think that, you know, it's an interesting animal playing tournaments. And what is hard for casual viewer to understand, but, you know, someone in poker might appreciate, or any competitive athlete might appreciate, is like, you're much more mentally distraught getting second, third, fourth than you are getting 200th, because you're so much more emotionally invested in the tournament when you're second, and you lost. Let's face it, you lost getting second just like you lost getting 200th from a mental standpoint, but you were so much closer to winning. So there's that expectation of winning, there's the hope of winning, there's, you know, you're so close to it that you can feel it, you can taste it, and when you get it stripped away from you, it's like, it would be like being engaged and then you don't get married, as opposed to going on a first date and you don't get married. You know,
right?
It's like you're much more invested in the relationship of this tournament, and so it's really tough to do. And I think for that reason, tournaments are really sort of finicky, because, you know, you can't control how often you win. There's so much that has to go right, even if you are, no matter who's playing, right? Even if you're the best player in the world, you're not going to win maybe more than once a year or something like that. Phil Humbol's a perfect example. He's one of the best tournament players in the world, supposedly, and he's won 14 bracelets. He's been playing for, 40 years. So it's like, just knowing that everything else is a loss, and playing a game that's structured to which you could, you know, at best maybe hope to win on average once every couple of years. Of course, on average, it's like, it takes a lot mentally to be in that spot, and it also takes a lot more variance than I think the average person thinks, and which means you need to have a lot bigger bankroll than most people think to play profitably with the variance on the big tournament circuit. So it's just not really for me. I much prefer the cash games. I think there's more to it. It's more dynamic. It's just my wheelhouse. But so I don't really play much tournaments. Like I had a big run like 2007, 2008, but it was mainly that I just, you know, ran well, and the tournaments I played, because I never really was like a huge tournament player. I just had some results in them because I did well in the few that I competed in.
I like the way you said that. It's your forte. It's your wheelhouse, the cash games. Listen, lastly, I know you're a busy man. What about tourney guys? I know it's changing now, but a lot of tournament players get all the TV fame. You know, that's what we watch on TV. But with things like Twitch, we're starting to see more cash games, you know, high stakes poker. Do you feel some of the upper echelon cash game guys should get more exposure, or do you think they're just happy the way it is?
That's a good question. I think that it's some of them like it the way it is, and some of them are drawn to cash games because of that. Some of the people play them because there's more money in cash games, and it's harder to there's more money involved, so it's more consistent. It's a better way to make a living as a poker player. It's really one of the only ways to make a living. I think it's hard to make a living as a full-time tournament player, and the ones that do are sort of above they either play online and grind a ton, or if they're on the live circuit, they're above the point to which they need to worry about the short-term variance because maybe they're sponsored or they're famous, and it's easier to ride the wave.
Right.
But yeah, it's something that you accept as a cash game player, that recognition from other people is not something that you're going to get, I think. And it's just it's part of it, like a lot of people are drawn to tournaments for the glory. I mean, that's like, if you think about it, you ask people why they want to play, it's a lot of cash game players you'll see at the World Series because they just, they want that chance to showcase their talent or to shine or to compete. And like, even in cash games, even if you win a lot, you still aren't in first place. It's like a continuum. Whereas in a tournament, you could actually be the winner.
Right.
That's kind of an exciting concept to people. And on a subconscious level, people want that sort of vindication that they actually won because they're talented. And so, even though there's not an immediate huge correlation between victory and skill in any one given tournament, you'll still find a lot of players drawn to that because they crave that. And I think it's cool that cash games are sort of coming more on the market, but I think it's a long way to go before the general public starts to grasp onto that, because it's just not shown, and it's not good for TV. Like, I mean, tournaments are so much more the nature to which people measure success in sports. If you look at any other sport, there's the Super Bowl, and it's whoever wins the Super Bowl is the best team. It's sort of how it works, and so that's just every occupation has pros and cons, and that's just part of the game.
Well, listen, Alec, continued success. Thank you so much for doing this. Continue running good in those cash games and playing good. By the way, continue the broadcasting, because a poker junkie like me loves it when a guy like you comes in the booth and explains how he loses the minimum with a flush to Phil Hellmuth's full house. I mean, it's great stuff. Please keep that up. Visit AlecTorelli.com and check him out on YouTube. He's got the hand of the day and a lot of great videos. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks for your time. I appreciate you having me on the show.